The theme of the India Today East Conclave is Rising from the East. What is it that can be done to foster a startup ecosystem in the eastern part of India? Get business to move at a speed much faster than we see, and can the East become an economic powerhouse like the western states of India? To talk about that, we've got people who've got deep interests in businesses cutting across different sectors in the eastern states, and hopefully over the next 45 minutes, they'd be able to spell out a roadmap for how the East can compete and beat the West. So let me introduce you to our guests in this high-powered session, starting with Harshavardhan Neotia, Chairman of the Ambuja Group. Welcome, sir. With us also here at the India Today Conclave East is Hemant Kanoria, Chairman and Managing Director of Srei. Shuvankar is the Executive Director of Senco Gold. Welcome. Shitangshu Jhunjhunwala is the Director of Turtle. They're into textiles. I want to start by asking Mr. Neotia to give everyone here at the India Today Conclave your roadmap for what needs to be done by individual states, by individual companies, and by the East as a region, so that the East of India can compete economically and possibly even beat the West.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much, India Today, for inviting me. Let me start with a small story, and a story from mythology. If you look at our country and you look at different parts of our country, we worship different idols, and there must be some historical significance to the reason why one particular idol dominates the thinking of a people in one particular region. Now, if you take the goddesses, we will see the western and northern states predominantly worshipping Lakshmi. If you see the southern Indian states, the predominant goddess is Saraswati. And if you see the eastern states, the predominant goddess is Durga or Kali. And if you see the three goddesses, they symbolize three very different types of thought process. Lakshmi predominantly symbolizes wealth. Saraswati symbolizes essentially learning and education. And Kali, which is emotional strength, is about creativity, innovation, etc. Now, I think that these goddesses have been chosen as the primeval kind of worship because those people of those regions had that kind of inclination. The people in the north and western India were more industrious, and they were more enterprising, and therefore they were those people who kind of created the wealth. The southern Indian people, as we have seen in information technology and in medical practice, etc., have dominated a lot of the intellectual aspect of it. And Calcutta has been in the forefront of creativity, of energy, of strength, of vigor, and those kind of things.
It's very interesting that you have this rather karmic invocation of goddesses to suggest why the West and the North are ahead when it comes to wealth creation. But is there a way in which Kali or Durga can meet Lakshmi?
So I think that it's not about beating anyone. I think we have, India's great tradition is in living with all different kinds of ideas together. And I think the natural inclination of the people of the East is to foster in a space of creativity. And I think the kind of activities that we would do best are activities that involve emotional intelligence over, let's say, industrious intelligence. Now, my argument, therefore, is that it's not a question of each part of India having to develop economically in a similar fashion. We can have different areas of expertise. And Eastern India, to me, would be more suitable for activities around academics, tourism, the creative work. We've had the best talents, writers, thinkers, philosophers, all kinds of people from here. And of course, they are now businesses too. It's not that they are not businesses, but they're not the similar kind of business that perhaps would dominate the Western landscape.
Mr. Kanoria, do you share that virtual abdication of commercial competition by Mr. Neotia saying we'll stick to creative excellence, let the West and the North make all the money they want? Or what do you believe can be done here in the East to compete economically with the West?
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I think that, I'll start with some statistics because I think that that really invites attention and focuses. So we have in the Eastern region, how I see, that there are 14 states or countries. Like if you were in Europe, it would be like 14 countries. We have 8 northeastern states. We have 4 eastern states, Bihar, Odisha, Bengal, Jharkhand. And we have 4 adjoining countries, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. And this has a population of about 557 million people. So it is about 55 crore. It is larger than the population in the US. So you can imagine the opportunity. And Calcutta is should be the right headquarters for anyone who wants to tap this huge market of people, of 557 million people, which has a huge potential. So therefore, I think that logically, people should be here in the Eastern region. They should be operating out of Calcutta. Now, why many of the companies are not? And I'll just share my example. We are running a financial institution here, and for the last 28 years, and I think that we have been reasonably successful. But every time I am asked this question when I'm in Bombay and Delhi, that why the hell do you operate out of Calcutta? If you move to Bombay, then your market cap would have increased by about 4 times. Because you are in Calcutta, so therefore you are discounted. But I have to look at the business model, that here, we have the biggest advantage because in Calcutta, we get a talent pool. We have bankers, engineers, we have engineering colleges, we have the management institutes here, and you get a very good talent pool. The quality of life is much better. If you see, people are more relaxed in Calcutta. So therefore, people can think you have, and especially for a financial services business or any business which require intellectual prowess, it is very important to have the right kind of environment. So I think that Calcutta offers the right kind of environment, and therefore, this should logically be the center where anyone who wants to start any of their service-based activities, whether it be in financial services or IT or tourism, as Harsh was mentioning, it would be the best base station to start any of the operations. Because statistically also, I think that you can capture 557 million people. And it is in such a close proximity, because if you want to fly from here to Guwahati, you are there in about 45 minutes if you want to fly. So therefore, as a base station, this ideally is very suitable. And if you see that in the last few years, there has been a lot of development on the infrastructure. So if you travel in Calcutta, you will find it greener. You will find more of flyovers which are there in Calcutta. So you can zip in and zip out of the airports and from the railway stations. You don't have to travel and waste so much of time. So I think logically, people should come in here. Now, there are some problems also. And I think that every state, every city would have its own set of problems. So here the problems which are there needs to be understood. And I think that if we work on it, it is logical to have the base station here for many of the companies. And especially from the manufacturing perspective also, if you see, the power cost in many of the other states are much higher than what it is in West Bengal. In West Bengal, you still have areas where the power cost is just about 4.5 rupees per unit. So the industrial companies who want to set up and where power is a very big input. So therefore, for them, it is logical to come in and set up their manufacturing plants also in West Bengal. And I think that, the biggest advantage that I see, especially with the labor unions, we operate so many companies. We have thousands of people working here at various levels. And we have never had a single day of labor problem. Because it is just that how do you deal with the people?
Okay. Mr. Jhunjhunwala, which are the sectors that you believe the East can compete in? Because textile is one where there's just so much fabulous fabric, indigenous fabric, which is native to all the states of the East. And yet we find so little effort to take that indigenous fabric and make a splash worldwide. It's happening in bits and parts and dribs and drabs, but not in the kind of scale or extent that it should. Which are the sectors that you believe are sectors where the East can compete and beat the West?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I think, where we lack, if that's your question, is marketing. Somehow I think the West and the other parts of the world, they've marketed their products in a much better way. So just to give you a small example, we work with small weavers in Murshidabad, and we do a lot of hand-woven fabrics, for our shirts, etc. And because you're a mainstream brand, so we are able to market it. But they tell us that there are so many designers who come in from Paris, from Milan, and they work with these guys. So I mean, the demand is definitely there. It's just a question of marketing because they don't have a proper connect or a proper channel to reach out to the consumer. So they are working majorly B2B for now. Another great opportunity which I feel is if we just look further to the east, we have Bangladesh, right? It's a big manufacturing hub, manufacturing for all the big brands of the world. So Bengal has a very similar, climate, water, etc. So if Bengal can just emulate that and, start looking at manufacturing on a large scale as an industry, the talent, the labor, it's all available. It's just a question of the vision and execution. And I'm sure with India, business in India easing out a lot of brands are now looking in to come into India and manufacture. Unfortunately, they don't look at the eastern part because of the lack of infrastructure today. But, that can change over the next 3 to 5 years. And brands who are today working in Bangladesh, they can easily come to Bengal.
Shuvankar Sen, what according to you are the sectors the East should be focusing on? Corporates and government should be focusing on sectors where the East has inherent advantages.
See, if you look at history, in 1970s, East or say Calcutta or Bengal was much ahead of say other parts of India. Why? Because at that point of time, coal was one of the major source of power and that was easier for industries to get it. So in very candid terms, we need to find out where our strengths lies. One is agriculture. So food processing, that becomes a very critical sector, which East, be it Bihar, be it Bengal, parts of Orissa, where there is so much farming happening. And today, as population of the country is growing, as we say, the rice belt of India, or the food belt of India. So Eastern UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, Bengal, Orissa, they can play a very big role in supplying to the rest of India. Second is, if we look at figures, MSMEs, mid-sized companies, industries, Bengal has the second highest registration of such MSMEs. So therefore, it's not about big industries, it's about many industries. Everyone has a place to survive in this part. Third is coal, power is there. Along with that, you will see that steel, cement, there are so many factories that are there here. So if we see that the country is growing overall in infrastructure and East, now with Northeast having a focused development growth. So we might see that, yes, the whole country is now looking at East at developing. The fourth thing, as Mr. Neotia said, that creativity. So if we look at it, the craftsmanship, be it my sector, which is jewelry manufacturing, or be it a sector of textiles and making clothes, designer clothes, or clothes done by hand. So somehow, what happens is that in East India, unlike West India, where maybe in jeans, it's been a desert, water has been less, not many farming activities happening. So people out there are much more laborious. Here, because of ample water, ample food, people have the time and they have the genetic condition to create things. And anything to do with creativity, so we could become the Barcelona of the world, something like that. So that is where East, Calcutta, we can do things about it.
Mr. Neotia, in your opening comments, you had this mythological invocation. But if we come to the current times, do you also have a big idea? Everyone's spoken about the creative powers and trying to unleash those. Apart from what you said in terms of academic excellence and cultural excellence, when it comes to business, what are the business opportunities that you sense? Because all of what was mentioned so far, whether it's rice mills or food processing, none of these can help pull millions of people out of poverty. None of these can help move up very quickly the scale to richness. What is it that you believe the East can do that gives it a competitive advantage?
See, Rahul, one of the challenges we've had more than the reality is the perception. And I think the fact that India today has taken this giant leap, so to say, and come and do their conclave here is an indication that things are changing. I don't think the reality is as bleak as often is made out to be. We have a lot of things going. What we don't have possibly or haven't had in the recent past is something like a big bang investment of a 10,000 crores or 20,000 crore kind of thing. So that's really where we've been missing this piece. But if you take the SME sector, the medium scale sector, and a lot of other units, if you drive down any road, highway out of Calcutta, you'll see hundreds of small units all over the place. So now if you ask for the sector specifically where I think we have traction, one of the areas where we have immense potential is tourism. And I think that can be a game changer. One of the things that I found very interesting is Calcutta Airport recorded one of the highest growth amongst all airports in India, and which is an indication of a lot more flights coming in and all sorts of tourism-related activities can augur very well in this scenario. The other area, of course, is in all the areas that require a certain amount of handcrafted skill. So whether it's in jewelry or textiles or, and they are very large. Remember that Bengal's textile production is even, I think, 25% or 30% of Bangladesh, which is a neighboring state. So we have a huge amount of growth possibilities in this sector.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned that the one thing which is holding back the East story or the Bengal story is the lack of a big ticket investment, as it were. And yesterday when we were discussing with corporates and even otherwise in Delhi or Mumbai, when you chat to any industrialist about the prospects of going to West Bengal, as an example, or Bihar, they say, where is the land? There is simply no parcel of land which is available. And yet, interestingly, you're in real estate and you've acquired large tracts of land. So what are your own personal learnings which you can share with others in terms of getting giant pools of land to set up whatever you want without getting into the kind of situation that we saw in Shingur?
So first of all, in real estate, you don't require that kind of land that we talk about when we look at 10,000 acres or 5,000 acres. So that's not exactly a comparable situation. Yes, it is true that if you want aggregated 5,000 acres of land in Calcutta, it's a bit of a problem. I mean, not Calcutta, even in Bengal, it's a problem. Partly because we are a very, very highly fertile state. Except for some remote pockets, there's hardly any fallow land in the near proximity of the metropolitan city. Now, if there is a fertile land, inevitably, and because the Bengal's land area ratio to population is twice more dense than the rest of India, you have many more farmers working on it. And therefore, to relocate or to convince a large number of people to relocate is always going to be a challenge. Having said that, there are a very large amount of land, I think 5,000-6,000 acres in various parts of the state with the state government, which they can allocate. And if you want smaller parcels, and today what has happened is except for a few very big industries like steel or cement, which require that kind of land, there's also been a shrinkage in the demand for land for high-tech industries. You don't need that kind of land. And therefore, smaller pockets of land is possible to get and not that difficult. Of course, some amount of tactful negotiation and, you can't bulldoze people in Bengal. That's one thing everyone who has tried doing has understood it the hard way. You have to go a little softer, you have to convince them, and you have to pay them a reasonable compensation. And I think if you do that with a human touch, it can work.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, just taking from him, when you see of land or talk about land, it's about big industries. But today, service sector is such a booming industry in the country. And if you really look at it, there are millions of people from Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Assam. I have been traveling all over India because of the stores in Bangalore, in Mumbai, in Delhi. So there is so many people who's traveled from east to there because of opportunities and lack of opportunities here. So if you look at service sector, you don't need land in width or in terms of how much is there, but you go up, you make buildings, the way Japan has grown with limited quantity of land. So we need to look at those ways. Maybe because education is very important to people of East India. If you look at Bihar, people really study a lot to become IS officers. In Orissa, because of poverty in certain areas, but if you look at it, there are a lot of good, knowledgeable people from Orissa who's working in high posts in other parts. So is in Bengal. So therefore, there is no reason that, the intellectual capacity, the knowledge is there. It's about using that intellectual capacity and looking at how we can maybe boom in the service sector.
Mr. Kanoria, how do you address this issue of industry needing land being highly fertile and therefore not available, and yet the need to invite industry to the east?
I think that in West Bengal or most of the eastern states, there are two intrinsic problems. One issue is on the marketing, that we are very poor in marketing ourselves. Like if you see the country also, we are doing a lot of things in the country. Last 20, 25 years, there's been a lot of development where the private investments has come into infrastructure or in manufacturing, services. The country has really moved forward. But in the last 3 years, the way the country has been able to market, because we have a prime minister who has been able to market the country to the overseas investors in a very big way, and has presented the advantages which the country has. So therefore, we have droves of money coming into the country. We have international investors all basically waiting at the borders to just make investments. That's the way. So similarly, I think in the eastern region, we have not been able to market ourselves very well. The second problem has been that, a very detailed introspection to see that what are the core advantages that we have. Instead of going all around and saying that, I can do this also, I want to have a manufacturing base, I want to have, I want to have services, I want to have this, that, everything. If you just look at our core strengths, we see that each state here has some raw material as a very, very strong strength. Some have human resources as a very big strength, like West Bengal has human resources, intellectual capital, which is a very big strength, which can be used well. In Jharkhand, you have resources, mineral resources. So similar in Bihar, you have agricultural resources. So each of the state has a lot of advantages. So how do we use those and gainfully bring in industries and be more focused about it? Land is not an issue in West Bengal, I can tell you, because we have parcels of land which is not fertile. And that parcel of land in Bakura, Purulia, so if the government starts doing things in a structured manner,
no, but those are also the districts that are the least developed.
No, but yeah, so therefore you can get industries there. You can give them low power cost there. So if you reduce the power cost, if you provide the infrastructure, people will come there. I don't think that it is going to be a problem. It's just that focusing, looking at that what are the strengths that we have, how do we structure it, how do we present it properly to the investor or whoever is coming in, and market it well. That's all. So it's not very difficult. It's simple solutions, but so many times what happens is that when the solutions are so simple, we just lose sight of it because we think it is not that simple. How can it be so simple? Such a complicated issue cannot be sorted out in a simple manner. But most of the answers are very simple to complicated issues.
Mr. Jhunjhunwala, did you agree with Mr. Neotia when he had this mythological invocation for why business, finance, corporates don't do as well in the East as they do in the North and the West?
I certainly agree with the whole creative and soft aspect because, we face it on a day-to-day basis, but I would put that as an advantage.
So he's basically saying that holds for everybody else except for me. I'm growing, I'm going really well, but for everybody else, this holds but for me. Yes.
No, so what actually I think the issue is that, when we are from the East, I think we ourselves think of us that, one step back. So, I have so many people when I go to the national forums and speak and they're like, you're one of the flag bearers of the East. And how do you do it? Or, why haven't you moved out like Mr. Kanoria gets asked as well? So I simply say that, the kind of talent pool that is available here, you have your NIFDs and your NIFTs, and we see the kind of people, the students coming out every year, and the creative pool is just amazing. So I think, again, it's a question of vision and marketing. I think somewhere, we feel that, because we are from the East, so we shouldn't be probably as big as someone from the West. But, just to give you an example of Zara, which started from a small village near La Coruña in Spain, and then, grew worldwide. So why can't a brand from Kolkata do the same?
So you hope to make Turtle the next Zara?
Bigger, of course.
And how do you hope to be able to do that?
I think it's definitely not related to geography. It's related to your own ambition, your own mindset. and your ambition to grow, because I don't think geography is a limitation factor. Today you can manufacture anywhere in the world, be it China, be it Bangladesh, be it Sri Lanka, be it anywhere in India. We see the kind of quality of manufacturing we get out of our factories in Bengal being far superior to those, elsewhere. So I don't think that, there is a challenge with geography, definitely.
Mr. Neotia, the one very interesting thought that was built on, I think Mr. Kanoria did when he spoke of 560 odd million people, is to leverage geography, Bangladesh, Myanmar. Do you believe enough is being done? Because clearly it isn't. What do you believe needs to be done more to harness the geographical advantages that these states enjoy? Is it an advantage, is it a disadvantage? Because of chicken's neck, strategic vulnerability, from a national security perspective, which is what consumes us mostly, it's a vulnerability. Economically, is it an advantage or a disadvantage?
So increasingly, the world is getting interconnected. So what was a challenge perhaps some years ago, increasingly will be less and less of a challenge as I see it. Now, that's not to say that we won't have our Doklam moments or we won't have some other challenges coming from time to time. But as we have seen the trend, if you see it from the post-World War, the world has become interconnected more and more. Trade has, in spite of all sorts of barriers and circumstances, has actually been flowing more and more. And therefore, our engagement with our neighbors is more and more. The second very important thing is that the infrastructure connectivity between Calcutta or Bengal and the rest of the hinterland that we have talked about, where the 550 odd million people reside, is getting better and better by the day. Whether it's air connectivity, ports, of course, we have a challenge with ports, which you heard yesterday, and we hope that that will get resolved, so we'll have more ports. But clearly, over a period of time, the road that is going to link the ASEAN region with Bengal and the rest of India, and of course, I do not know what's the latest on the One Belt, One Road initiative, which also has through the Silk Route, etc. So I think all of that is going to augur very well for the...
No, because there is the economic dimension, Mr. Kanoria, then there is the strategic dimension. You mentioned the One Belt, One Road project that's being pushed by China at the highest levels. Do you believe this is a battle for corporates to fight, or do you believe this is a battle which state governments, along with the central government, have to fight as a team to try and leverage the advantages that Burma, Bangladesh offer, Mr. Kanoria?
So basically, I think that on the infrastructure side, the government of India is already working along. First of all, I think that if we take too many things on our plate, then we'll get confused. So the simple thing is, how do we get connected into Myanmar through West Bengal, going through Siliguri, northeastern part of India, getting ourselves connected to Myanmar, Singapore, Thailand. We can just reach that whole route through the road which is getting built up. So if we concentrate on that, and a lot of work has already been done, so we get connected right up to through Thailand, Malaysia, into Singapore. And that would create a huge outlet for any company in the country from western part of India or wherever. So that is one infrastructure which needs to be built up. The second infrastructure which is very important is that we have the Bay of Bengal. If you just recall that hundreds of years back, when the East India Company came in, they came and settled down in Calcutta. And from Calcutta, they were controlling the entire eastern part of the world. So therefore, they were southeastern part. So they were in Singapore, which was controlled by Calcutta. The entire eastern part of India and the eastern hemisphere. It was only because of the fact that they could see that the route which they had to the sea was a very big advantage, because through the road route, the cost goes up. So therefore, that
what you're
needs to be
saying is
developed.
very obvious, and what you're saying is apparent. Why then is it not being done? Whose fault is it?
So I'm not saying it's a fault. It's just that as I said, that it is someone needs to sit down and think and go back to the basics. It is very easy to implement it if someone goes back to the basics. But many times, what happens is that we get so confused because we want to do so many things that we just get lost. And that
Basically,
is what is
you're
happening.
saying you get so busy playing politics that business suffers.
Exactly.
It's important that you say that, because Mr. Jhunjhunwala, what do you think are your thoughts to try and tap into markets, huge markets, like Bangladesh for you could possibly be a huge market. Also Myanmar, which we see China, which doesn't have the kind of connectivity that we do with Myanmar, leveraging much more than us.
So I think definitely, Bangladesh, Myanmar are very big market opportunities. We have so many customers in our stores in Calcutta who come and shop from Bangladesh. And, they say that, why don't you open stores in Bangladesh? I think it's just a question of, either one, finding the right partner because, you have certain red tapes if you want to go on your own, obviously. But having said that, I think, the eastern part of India itself has so much opportunity. Northeast is just opening up as a big market now. Bengal, one of our very good stores is in Gangtok, for example, which is a small remote town in Sikkim. So I think the entire eastern belt, Myanmar, Thailand, Bangladesh, it's a huge opportunity. It's just a question of ambition.
Mr. Neotia, you mentioned tourism. And I must tell you that I was at Ganga Kutir just day before yesterday, and what has been developed there is fantastic, and you don't ordinarily associate. For example, that there are great weekend getaways away from Bengaluru, there are good getaways away from Delhi. You don't necessarily associate that with Kolkata. How do you believe tourism can be leveraged so that we have not just one Ganga Kutir, but dozens of them?
So, well, someone has to start it, and so I'm not going to say something where I'm not putting my foot in my mouth. I have already traveled extensively around Bengal and picked up very, very strategic pieces of land at right from the mountains to the Sundarbans to the sea beach of Digha to heritage sites, etc. At the moment, 2 of those properties are under development, and I hope that in the next 4 to 5 years, I should be able to put a circuit of 7, 8 properties that would showcase the rich biodiversity and culture of the state. And hopefully that will then set the tone for other people to come and to build the ecosystem. I can't find any other way to do it, because if you see and look back to Kerala or to Rajasthan, or even Goa. It was one Taj hotel in Aquada that set off the Goa process. And then, of course, hundreds have followed. So I thought that, we can keep talking about it, so let's get down and doing a few things. So let's hope in the next
That truly is very special. And I think you've got a very strong point when you say that somebody has to get started, because, Mr. Kanoria, this is not what you ordinarily associate very easily with West Bengal. And when you go out and see something as spectacular, you realize that if this can be done, then why did nobody think of it earlier? So as you said, it is easy to get done, but somebody has to get down to the business of actually doing it. What do you believe can possibly be done to try and leverage the opportunities on the tourism sector?
Yeah, so what I feel is that one, of course, when we talk about tourism, there is a lot of tourism, but it's a lot of middle income or lower income tourism that's happening. And I think it's to create a few iconic properties at few spectacular locations, which will draw the attention of the thinkers and policymakers and others at the potential of each of these locations. That's number one. Number two is that, again, there's the chicken before the egg, infrastructure. Now, one could argue that let the infrastructure come, the hotels will follow, but usually we have seen, whether it was in Rajasthan or in Goa, the hotels came first and the infrastructure followed. So I've taken that.
Or the infrastructure sometimes never followed.
Well, sometimes yes, and like in Gurgaon, it's taken till ever for it to follow. But New Town is a classic reverse example where the infrastructure came in before the rest of the development came. So I said, okay, I can't build the infrastructure. It's not, Hemant can perhaps help me a bit in building the infrastructure. But I said, let me put up the hotels and hopefully the infrastructure will follow. And that will then set off an ecosystem. So that's what I'm trying to do. But the more people can come and join this party, the more we are going to have fun.
That's nice. It virtually is a party once you have the infrastructure and the facility in place. But that really is the challenge. I also want to welcome now C.S. Ghosh, Managing Director and CEO of the Bandhan Bank. We've been discussing before you came, Mr. Ghosh, ideas that can unleash the economic potential of the East and make it compete with the Western states and the Northern states. As somebody who works so closely on microfinance, what are your ideas in terms of small business, in terms of medium-sized business, and also large enterprise to try and get the East to compete with the West? Is that at all possible in your view?
Thank you. I'm asking apologize for that, for delay. Sorry for that. As a Bandhan bank, I cannot say that no. it is in big opportunities in here, which we are now born in this eastern region. And as a bank, we are 70% of our operation in eastern region. So there is small and medium, very good opportunities in here. If you see that the data for the country perspective, 5.1 million MSME have in the eastern region, which is the 12% of the total country MSME in here. But all over the country MSME, the data shows that the 5 to 7% are funded by the formal bank. And that is the 95% they depend on informal financing from the people on that. So in that sense, if you say that, it is a big opportunities in the eastern region where bank can be financed. And there is a big opportunities also medium and small enterprise who can be grow. And 70% of the micro and small enterprise is export oriented. So there is a big opportunities in here. So, but other point is there, if you see that the banking industry in the eastern region, banking service in eastern region is very poor compared to the south, compared to the central. If I say that the CD ratio in eastern region, if it is a 41%. If you go to this, the CD ratio in the south in the 98%. So in that sense, the CD ratio is low, is a two cause in here. The deposit in here is a very high and credit is not happening on that. So if the bank will be penetrate the credit penetration in the eastern region, so that in the small and medium enterprise can grow more, people will get the more employment in here, export will become more, and I hope that it will be helped to the Indian economy to grow on that.
Okay.
27% people are living in eastern India, but their GDP contribution is in half, the 13%. So until the banking penetration will not come, industry is a small and medium will be not increase, it will not happen. If you come to the history on that, the India, really it has been born from eastern. The capital, first capital in here, and first industry in here, the East India Company. But if you come on that now, three industry historically we got it, the engineering, heavy engineering, tea and jute, all three are in a bad shape. So only we have the big capital on that, the micro and small industry we can grow. And that can be also give the good, the growth in the economy of eastern region and also contribute to the national economy.
Okay, in the last part of this conversation, I want to ask all our guests here, and I'll start with Mr. Kanoria, on what are your ideas? Because one of the pet themes of the central government is Stand Up India, Start Up India. You've spoken about what corporates need from government and what corporates need to do, but what about helping youth create jobs for themselves and for others around them? By fostering a spirit of innovation, by setting up, we see a lot of that happen in Bengaluru, we see some of it happen in Hyderabad and elsewhere. What can be done to set up startup culture here in the East?
I think that basically what the small, tiny and medium sector enterprises or startups, they need in any country and any state is very free-flowing guidelines and rules and regulations. Today, we have so many guidelines, so many laws, so many compliances which has to be done, and every day it keeps on changing. So therefore, the entire environment, anywhere in the country, it's very difficult because we keep on financing small and medium enterprises also to a very large extent, and we see that how difficult it is for them. It's a struggle. So if the government messes around less, if they create an environment where the streamlining of processes are there, and it does not keep on getting changed on a daily basis, I think life will become much easier. India is the country of enterprise, of entrepreneurs. We did a rural enterprise, and we created 75,000 entrepreneurs in the rural areas, only in the eastern part of India.
You know, the one thing I must share this, I find very fascinating about Srei, is that you actually managed to make some money out of Vijay Mallya. How did you even do that?
We did.
Given the fact that all his creditors are just chasing him and he's still away in London, you actually managed to make money out of him.
No, but you see, actually he wanted to pay. But the whole environment, that's why I said environment. Today also the environment doesn't want to take money from them. And I'm not joking. There's about 1700 crore which we have got extra, which is lying in the court for the last 2.5 years, and no one wants the money.
So you be consultant now to Government of India.
It's very difficult.
No,
it's an
but
arduous task to be there.
It's a good point you make, because there is the politics of bad loans, and then there is the commerce. For example, just recently we've seen defaulting promoters are being told that they can't bid for their own bad assets, whereas that's really one way of encouraging rates to go up, by having a strong spirit of different people coming in trying to virtually auction those projects.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that basically I'm opposing that, because it's not the right way to go around. That if you are saying that a promoter who has made a mistake, or there may be environmental problem, because of that they have got into a problem, you can't say that, this guy is a devil, so therefore we must chase him to hell. I think that that's the wrong way of going about it, and that's why we are going to face problems. You see,
Mr. Neotia, do you think these are now economic decisions being governed by politics? I don't want to take any one name, but there's so many big companies that are in problem. The moment you say, "Humne uska pura karobar chhin ke isko," that's just fantastic politics. But it's really bad economics and bad commerce. So are you upset with the way the Insolvency Act is being changed?
No, I do agree that this needs a little bit of rethink, and there is a certain, because probably there has been a hype in public mind that a lot of money has got looted, etc., and obviously politicians have to respond to public mood. There is an excess, in my opinion, that is happening. However, there is always, amongst every kind of promoter, there are those who have genuinely got into trouble and those who have caused it upon themselves for perhaps pecuniary reasons. So I think we need to separate the wheat from the chaff, and that's not as easy as, as said. So I think that's a little bit of a difficult task for any government to be able to do this.
So what are your ideas about trying to build and nurture a startup ecosystem here?
So I think that's a very important step. I think generally it has been somewhat weaker in this part of India, the sense of entrepreneurship amongst the natives. I mean, it's mostly, if you see, a large part of the enterprise in West Bengal is owned by non-Bengalis or non-native people from this region. But just to augment the capacity for creating entrepreneurs, we have set up incubation hub ourselves very recently, few months back, called Neotech Hub. And we have got a very good response. We now have about 15 startups working out of it. And every day, more and more people are joining. It's just about 6 months old. And I think gradually that ecosystem is getting built. Of course, Bangalore and Hyderabad have taken a fair degree of leap ahead. But we'll catch up, I think, very soon.
Mr. Jhunjhunwala, you have any ideas about do you believe it's possible at all for the East, and especially for Kolkata, to become a startup center, hub of startups?
Yeah, I think it's just a question of the right channel. So I'm part of Calcutta Angels, where we, evaluate 2 to 3 startups every month, mostly from the East. I'm also a mentor.
How many do you fund?
So we have funded about 10 to 12 in the last year itself. And, I'm also kind of a mentor to NASSCOM 10,000 Startup Warehouse, who set up a branch here now in Calcutta. And, I've seen some of the startups who are working here, they give them the infrastructure and the office space, etc. Some of the ideas, some of these young budding entrepreneurs are really exciting. It's just that, again, that whole marketability. So East somehow never features in any of the articles, etc. So maybe India Today can help us with that.
Sure, I think that's help with marketing is something that 2 of our panelists have mentioned, so that's something that should be looked at quite seriously. Mr. Sen, your ideas in terms of trying to nurture a startup ecosystem?
So, it starts at college. So what is important, as Mr. Neotia said, that one is the financial support, the other one is the moral support. So in terms of that, yes, East has always been weak in financing very easily. So once these startups, they find that yes, they are willing to take risks, because not all startups becomes like a successful startup. So that is very important. So the ability to take risk and guide them and nurture them and mentor them, there has to be a collaboration between the government, between the private sector and the academic institution.
It's also, Mr. Neotia, a question of mindset. I see with my younger cousins, they refuse to even consider the possibility of working in a going enterprise. They say, why would I work for someone else? I'll just set up. They're in college or Harvard, wherever, passing out. They refuse to entertain the idea of working with somebody else, whether it succeeds or not. They want to go up and start up something. Do you see that similar mindset changing here too?
Yeah, that's because I think today because of Facebook and the rest of it, all citizens all across the world are interconnected. And there is a lot of sharing of ideas. So the ideas that are happening in Delhi or Bombay are very fast coming across to Calcutta. So the youth, I think, are very, very similar, unlike, say, in our generation when this kind of, we were pretty much isolated, and at least till we went into business and sort of had interactions in a greater way. So I think that culture of young people wanting to set up things is certainly increasing. There is a little resistance at the family level. There is a popular feeling in this part of India that if you're doing a business, you're doing something highly risky, and your daughter is not exactly marriageable to a businessman, but is perfectly marriageable to an engineer who works for a businessman. So this is a popular kind of notion that operates here, but I think it's fast changing.
You know, Bandhan Bank does a lot of startups.
Yeah.
They may not be the kind of startups that feature on Silicon Valley magazines, but these are startups and very successful startups. What are your ideas, Mr. Ghosh, in terms of setting up a startup culture?
I will be like to, in the same line, give the first life when I started my enterprise, and resigned from a permanent job to a new enterprise. In 2001, I worked in NGO, and one day I come to the home and ask to my wife, I resigned from microfinance in the NGO, and I have decided to start the microfinance institution. Whole night she cried.
She cried.
Huh. She said that what you taken decision, this is a fixed income. You are coming to the variable income, and so he said the uncertain income. How I run the family? And whole night finish, and the morning call from brother-in-law. Are you mad? Anybody will be like to left the job and start this type of enterprise. This is a challenge, how you manage the family first. And third stage, all of my friends and relatives far away from me. He is in mad. Anytime he is asking money for the new enterprise, don't go in here. So this is a challenge in that the first time. And come to this, the banking industry, to asking the money. I came to this idea to go to this one of the development bank. 45 minutes, I tried to convince the officer to give the chair to sit to share my opinion. I have not get. And every week, 2 times I went to that office and build up the personal relationship, not the business, anything I have not talked. After 18 months, he moved to give some loan to me. So this is an environment of our country on that. Eastern region is more on that. In that environment, one person has come to start as a startup. It's a very big, challenging decision on that. So
but you also had the persistence to go back to that person for 18 months to try and convince him to give a small loan. Most people would give up and say, okay, where can I go find the next job?
Yes, it is right. So that is any enterprise has need to see the right vision and to build up the confidence on themselves. Say, yes, I like to prove it. Now you say that I have a lot of friends and relatives. My wife is happy, brother-in-law happy, all are happy.
Now they're coming to you for money, I assume.
But I am in a problem now.
Now, as long as you are not running away from them any longer. Isko dur rakho, he'll ask for a loan.
Now, the next point is there. You see that when Bandhan has started this enterprise, now it is a 90 lakhs entrepreneur we developed. And if I give the one example to you, how enterprise is developing. Just the few months before, I went to visit with one of the deputy governor of Reserve Bank, Biral Acharya, and meeting with some of the customers. It's a very old woman, 73 years old, and Viral is asking, how long with your Bandhan? 10 years. What you started with them? The 3,000 rupees. What is now? 73,000 rupees. And he asked on that, what you done 3,000, what is done now is at 73,000. And illiterate women explain, say that 3,000 rupees I taken, I purchased the shari from the local market, sell to door. Today,
Purchase what?
shari.
Saris.
Oh,
Shari.
sarees. Okay.
She is now talking about it, that I am now 73,000. I purchased from Monglahat, from shari and garments, and selling to my shop. I have the 3 people who are working under me. Is illiterate. Would you not say that she is a good entrepreneur?
Oh, absolutely.
So that is in 90 lakhs we developed in our country. So lot of opportunity, not only the big as the enterprise.
That's absolutely true. Can we have a warm round of applause? This is startup culture of a very zameen se juda hua kind, but it's the kind of startup culture which we really need to foster. We're out of time on this discussion. I want to thank all of you for coming in. You know, there's the one very interesting thing about talking to corporates in the East is that there's much less bluster. You know, when you're in Mumbai or Delhi or elsewhere, there's a lot of bluster. Here, it's very rooted, very real, very earthy, and yet, you know, all of you are so successful in what you're doing, so there's real money to be made as well if you know how to do it. Thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you.